This is an amazing time to actually kind of take stock of your supply chain. What bad habits did our organization pick up over the last 3-4 years? How can we exercise those demons out a little bit, get this back to a really streamlined place that operates really efficiently to be ready for the next upturn in consumer demand?
Hello and welcome to another episode of Freight to the Point. My name is El-Alfy and I will be your podcast host for today. We've talked a lot about the ocean market in our podcast, from rates, inventory disruptions, and you name it. Lots of things happening in the ocean world. But I think it's about time to shine a spotlight on road freight for a change, don't you think? So, and there's no one better to join me to discuss this topic other than Mr. Michael Starr. He's the Zen Cargo's Overland Commercial Director. Michael, thank you for being here. Would you like to give us an intro about yourself?
Very quick intro. I've been in the freight and logistics arena, as I like to say, for about over 15 years now in the US, APAC, and now European region. I've been with Zen Cargo for almost 4 years, maybe a little bit over 4 years now. Happy to get stuck into road freight.
I can't wait. So let's buckle up and start the journey, right, Michael? So there are lots of key trends in the market and obviously the road market in specific in today's episode. And I think there are lots of things that happen around the world and where we are and how it's changed over time. So my first question to you really is to kind of understand how the road freight evolved since before the pandemic. We'll take that as a milestone as everyone can relate to. And what kind of a road strategy looked like in the old days before the pandemic?
Yeah, I would say certainly a lot has changed for the last, let's say, 4 years. We've had a couple key inflection points with the pandemic, and then, of course, the Ukraine-Russian war afterwards. I would say when we look at the pandemic versus like post-pandemic versus, kind of pre, the road freight was really structured. It was really very set, like very structured, asset-based. And you're starting to see, especially with the pandemic time, like how quick everything had to move to like service your customers to get to achieve the speed to market that you wanted to achieve. You really had to just accelerate all aspects of your supply chain, and road, of course, being the first and last link, at the very least the first and last link of your supply chain. So when you talk about like delighting your customers in the last mile, whether it's B2B, B2C, the pandemic was all about speed, getting stock to your customers, getting it there, in the time frame that they expected, and costs just naturally kind of became second nature to that. So what we saw, especially in the last 4 or 5 years, is, of course, digitalization and technology have really helped kind of change the old ways of doing things, the old real structured, this is the way it's been done for 30 years. It's kind of started to change a little bit. The pandemic broke a lot of that down, right? With like needing to be quick to market. It broke a lot of those barriers down naturally as well. The problem then is with, when you look at 2022, February, March, with the war in Ukraine, that then took all the, really fast, quick decision making that had to happen, then made it very expensive. Now, obviously, that's changed a little bit with the downturn in the marketplace, and road is certainly feeling that, but not nearly to the degree that you're seeing that in the ocean freight market, for instance. So I would say that's a really big transitionary period. The last 5 years is having to go fast, and now fast has become expensive.
It is interesting you're saying that, because definitely we are seeing a demand falling down from how it was in the past. So as you said, everything was fast, and I love your analogy, speed and fast. That's when it comes to road. But how did the carriers respond to that slowness of demand?
I think you saw a lot of them kind of really jump in with both feet and change a lot of their processes and ways of working to achieve what their customers were demanding of them. And of course, you saw a lot of investment in assets, in new trucks, Euro 6s, clean technology, more drivers. Everyone knows that basically everywhere you look around the world, there's a tremendous driver shortage gap that exists and is growing, and so everyone's investing in that, to make sure that they can meet their customers' needs. So that's really the big changes there is the carriers. I would say when you see the money on the money writing on the wall, you can carriers will generally try and follow that. You've seen the uptick in technology with the telematics, and you working with companies like Four Kites and Project 44. A lot of carriers are starting to integrate with them from their telematics perspective because they know that's what the market is starting to demand. So yeah, they're kind of being pulled by the customers' needs and wants to change a lot of their old processes.
So, how do we see the difference between road in specific and other modes of transport in terms of disruption, in terms of how the road changed in response to that disruption, and the changes of kind of carrier relationship? Obviously, everyone is really aware of the ocean relationship carriers, where there's a lot of capacity. All the things ocean now, but how does it differ from the road side of things?
Between ocean and air, there's such a fundamental difference with road because of how fragmented the road marketplace is. In the US, there's 50,000 different carriers. In Europe, it's not too dissimilar. When you look at the ocean marketplace, you're talking about, 8, 9 bigger ones and a few niche carriers. And even air, you're talking about, quite good, cargo lines and also passenger that move cargo alongside some niche carriers as well, but there's also alliances there. There's interline, alliances there for moving cargo through each other's flights. So you're really talking about, 30, 40, 50 options on air freight. So that's broken down so dramatically when you look about road, because if you're a first mover in road freight, it doesn't necessarily translate to the rest of the market. And that also applies, of course, to rates and capacity. Let's say I have too few shipments for the amount of trucks that I have, because let's say I bought 50 trucks or 100 trucks during the pandemic, and now obviously there's a bit of a downturn at the moment. I could drop my pricing to try and fill those trucks, but it doesn't necessarily even mean that I'm going to see those shipments. It doesn't actually mean I'm going to keep my drivers busy. Like, it's just not how the market correlates. And even though there's obviously, of course, fixed asset costs, it's just not to the degree of laying up a cargo ship and getting the rates to come back up. Because if you lay up all your trucks and just move the bare bones that keep your customers relatively happy, someone else is going to be trying to fill theirs. There's 30,000 competitors in Europe for full truckload. So
Yeah.
it just doesn't translate to the same market. So when you look at solutions, I think what the interesting thing is that solutions tend to move quicker in road freight than they do in other modes of transportation, but rates and capacity tend to not change that much.
Yeah, it's interesting you're saying that, because you're kind of providing an insight of how the carriers are thinking, and that's really interesting, because not many shippers understand the logic of how carriers are thinking. And I think the key here is really understanding how to be a good customer, right, for the carrier as well, in tough times or low or up times. How would the shippers think in terms of road freight when it comes to strategy and in the kind of restocking cycles? And obviously there are lots of risks, right? And at the same time, what kind of opportunities that they should grab?
I think because road freight is so intrinsic to your end customer's experience, again, whether it's B2B or B2C, it ends up on a truck and being delivered somewhere. It's so core that I think strategy really plays a strong element to build that strategic partnership with one or a variety of carriers, or non-asset based companies that fill the strategic needs that you have across your supply chain. That to me is like you start number one with like I want to build a strategic partnership with ABC or 1, 2, 3, and you start to when you go to market you start to see what everyone wants and needs, and they're definitely not the same. No Haulier, no non-asset based provider is the same, and they all have different wants and needs. And if you can work to a mutually beneficial situation, you tend to find long-term relationships that support each other through like great growth when everything's going well, and you just need a lot of support, a lot of capacity, a lot of help solving problems, versus and then the bad times when you need to move things at the most cost effective way possible, and it's bare bones. That's how I think you like that's a mind sorry the frame that the framework that you start from is building a strategic relationship.
I think definitely it is a key thing to have with your characters, right? It's to build strategic relationships. Let me take you into the world of problems, right? Everything in any mode of transport, unfortunately, things can be challenging at times, right? Apart from Brexit, which was a very big challenge for every single customer and shipper in road transport, what kind of issues or challenges they may face that really goes and affects the market in the road freight world.
A couple of the big ones would be, of course, driver shortages and capacity shortages, or a glut of capacity. Fuel, depending on what trade lane you're operating, it's 25 upwards of maybe 35% of your operating costs on a daily basis as a transport provider. Um, it's investing in new technologies. There's always, it's not so binary as with ocean and air, where you make a a really big purchase and you can see that investment play out for like many years. Trucking is not necessarily as much as a you see a shorter term benefit, and then there's new technologies that come into place, and the like the capex required to buy a truck is not obviously the same as buying a Boeing or a new 20,000 TEU vessel. So it's a bit of a quicker turnover there. So their assets themselves, um, and then I would say certainly like reliability
Yeah,
is a big
absolutely.
one. Again, when it touches when like road freight touches your customer so like so importantly, um, that reliability piece just starts to we all have those escalations of missing a delivery slot, or 30 minutes late, and someone's been waiting to offload for 30 minutes, and or maybe they hired some laborers for the day to offload, and it's just every time those reliability
Mm.
issues come into play, they have these knock-on effects to the carriers, to the customers, to you yourself as the shipper. So they're also very intrinsically linked together.
These kind of challenges are slightly different from other modes of transport, but at the same time, I think it's been consistent, right? It doesn't come up like you see driver shortages, and it's always been either comes this time of period. There are driver shortages and it's resolved, and then a few years later there will be driver shortages. It literally becomes a natural reoccurrence.
Very cyclical, yes. I mean, with also road freight, with the once a ship like leaves its last port in the Far East, okay, it's slow steaming, but you generally have a pretty finite window when it's actually going to arrive to, let's say, the
True.
European port of call. Um, and maybe it's plus or minus 24 hours or whatever. But when you look at journey, it's such a small percentage of that 40-day, 45-day journey. Road freight, with how delays work and working hours for the drivers work in US obviously, as well as Europe and the UK, these little bits of time lost,
Mm.
or efficiency lost, actually has a really large knock-on effect. And So this is where planning comes really key with your between
100%.
shippers and hauliers. For instance, we had the bank holiday yesterday, or maybe well, sorry, you can say what on May 29th, bank holiday, and so Germany and a few other countries have a driving ban. So you had a driving ban Saturday, Sunday, Monday. You have plenty of customers who would expect that you could have delivered something that collected on Friday for Tuesday morning, but you
Mm,
actually couldn't have driven most of that time.
it's
So
true.
you need to like on a really like week by week, almost day by day basis, be kind of consulting and working with your hauliers to know um, like the best way to service your customers, whether they're your own like internal stock transfers between warehouses or they're your final customers, etc.
But I think we've kind of spent a fair amount on challenges. Now I'll take a U-turn and start talking a little bit about how shippers really navigate the market in terms of keeping the costs down and avoidance of costs and unnecessary costs. Because
Mm.
obviously with ocean we know again what kind of costs that we can avoid, and with road not many would be aware of it. So what kind of things the shippers could do to minimize that?
So I'd say there's like finite or like just easy short term stuff that you can do, and then there's long strategic opportunities. Um, the one thing I'll say is that this is an amazing time to actually kind of take stock of your supply chain, especially when it comes to road freight, and
Hmm.
analyze every bit and bob of it. And you can say, because there's a bit of a downturn right now, and it's a really good opportunity to say what bad habits did our organization pick up over the last 3-4 years. How can we exercise those demons out a little bit and get this back to a really streamlined place that operates really efficiently to be
Hmm.
ready for the next upturn in consumer demand. So I think when I talk about exercising demons, it's a lot about that communication and planning. So it's a really good opportunity to sit down at least with your top like the top trade lanes that you're working with, the top customers that you have, and let's say they have certain requirements. Well, how can you start from what they need and work backwards to and like eliminate all of the opportunities for extra charges to come into play,
Hmm.
demurrage, detention, customs issues, etc. When it's kind of a calmer period, you can start to take those costs out of the process and again be ready for when you're moving 20 trucks a day instead of when you're moving 5 trucks a day, right? Because
Hmm.
that's it, like exponential value fixing those issues now. And then from a more strategic perspective, again, it's a great opportunity to look at consolidation. Are there more interesting ways of moving cargo that we're moving today? You know, I don't want to say, I don't want to turn my road customers to short sea customers, but that's a great opportunity, right? Is
No
to
one wants.
opportunity to just say, well, okay, we've always done it this way, but why have we always done it this way?
Hmm.
And maybe we actually, when we look at our supply chain, it's hard to tell when you have, let's say, 40, 50 buyers who are all kind of operating independently. You bring it all together and you say, actually, we can all have cargo ready around the same time in Italy, Germany, France, whatever it may be. And this is actually an opportunity to, instead of organizing 10 different shipments from 10 different locations that all
Hmm.
have 10 different deliveries into your warehouse, right? So there's a lot of operational cost built into that, having 10 different
Hmm.
people show up on 4 different days. How can we turn that into 2 or 3 deliveries and collections and make that more cost effective and operationally efficient? Those are the types of things that you can look at now as well as multi-stop truckloads or consult like milk run origin consolidation opportunities.
One of my favorites is milk runs at origin and destinations. It's like literally a minibus going and picking up
Oh
and then going back. It's such a great thing. Yeah.
yeah, it's amazing, especially if you have like any sort of critical mass yourself as a
Hmm.
shipper to start to bring those types of things together. And you work with a company, an asset based or a non-asset based company that complements your geography and your supply chain, and then you get a lot of value out of that exercise.
Yeah.
And like you said, you can do it at origin and at destination. You can really kind of do it wherever you have some sort of critical mass of suppliers or customers.
Well, compared to ocean, I mean, like, literally consolidate and just go, right? It's different just going to the port and waiting, and it takes a bit of time to depart. But now it's just with roads, it's just consolidate, drive, and most of the cases depends on the transit. It will be very quickly to arrive, and it'll be a very economical option.
That's a great point. You make some of these options, a lot of options when it comes to road freight that um, are more strategic and long term and can take cost out. Very oftentimes they can actually add value in terms of like reducing transit time, quicker to market, quicker to supply chain lead time from your suppliers into your warehouses. It's usually not a you know um, this or that. It can be both in road freight. I would say actually more often than not it can be both, because
Yeah.
that critical mass makes it obviously more economically efficient for everyone who's in your supply chain, haulier, so on and so forth, suppliers.
And I really love you mentioning a lot of value, right? Again, yes, costs can be reduced and everything, but for me, it's the epiphany as an account manager. I'll have to be biased. It's really the value drivers that you bring, not just with cost. So everyone can do the cost, right? But it's the value that adds to that cost that you're paying. So how can shippers get that value with the relationship with their carriers? What kind of things that they can do?
I mean, it all starts with creating like a win-win scenarios where like
Mhm.
you're aligned for a mutually beneficial outcome, right? Whether if you're a shipper and it's cost out, or if it's transit time reduction, maybe both. In a perfect world, you get everything. um, then I think you find the right strategic opportunities and you have that mindset, you're going to get value delivered to you. And then, if you partner with one of the things that I love about Zen and my work at Zen is I get to partner with customers and fill those gaps in their supply chain with,
Mm.
the same operational efficiency of working with Zen comparatively to working with, let's say, 4 or 5 or 8 different hauliers that you have to work with. There
Mm.
is no single asset based organization like in the world that can do everything well, and deliver perfectly.
That's very hard to find. Yes, absolutely.
It's not impossible, but I mean, if you find it, you're paying out the wazoo for it as well.
Mm.
Um, so that's one of the beautiful aspects of working with a non-asset based carrier is you're able to have the same operational efficiency but work with uh, across your whole supply chain, filling all those different gaps with better solutions for the marketplace. To like tie it into the last point, I definitely think having a like mutually agreed, I guess I would say statement of works or scope of works, in that both shipper and carrier outline before the engagement what value you're looking to achieve and derive, and what you're going to be able to do for the other party, and that sets again the framework for the whole engagement and delivering
Mm.
upon that value. So I think it's also very important to have all that kind of like to have your wants and your needs planned out in advance, and then go find the right strategic partners to make that happen for you, who align to that vision that you're asking for. Because a lot of times you go so far up the river with trying to like you think this is going to be the right solution, but it turns out it was actually never going to be the right solution because you're just too misaligned on service delivery standards or
Yeah.
technology, etc. It's much better to kind of outline that all out in front and then basically agree on it moving forward as the next step.
Yeah, and it's interesting as well. It's not we're not just looking at moving the freight from point A to B. Is the value as well that brings to other things on the side, right? Like be it your customs process, whether you have the same broker as your freight provider, be it your systems that you use and all that. So it definitely gets more granular as you start getting the value that you're doing. Just not really only moving A to B.
Value can be so granular as Um, our warehouse likes to load on Fridays, but our broker, let's say you're moving from the UK to the EU or EU to the UK, but our broker isn't open on Saturdays and Sundays, and it either creates demurrage or it creates a challenge that we actually have to load on Thursday mornings now instead to meet the transit time requirements and the customs clearance. It can be so simple as aligning the right solution that gives your warehouse the best of that world, makes the customs worker be able to work, for an hour on a Sunday to get the clearances done for everything that loaded on Friday, and your customer like is there at 8:30 in the morning on Monday, and he's getting his deliveries, and he's really happy too. Instead of having a truck be stuck, he's at 11 a.m. on Monday, and he's like, "Where's the trucks that I'm expecting? Are they stuck in the Netherlands waiting for clearance, or something like that?" So value can be as granular as just exercising a little bit of those challenges.
That's great, Michael. I completely agree. I think we could talk about that all day long. The road freight world is a big one. So I think it will be interesting to have another episode on solutions part of road freight, because everyone really understands the kind of ocean side and the air side, but not with a road. I think the great food for thought that the listeners could have there. Thank you so much, Michael. I really enjoyed that discussion, and thank you for joining us all, whoever is listening, to another episode of Freight to the Point. I'd like to ask you to not forget to like or subscribe to our series on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or Google Podcasts if you enjoyed this episode. And of course, if you have any questions or feedback, please feel free to reach out to us on LinkedIn or any of your social media. We'd love to hear from you. Thank you so much.